Most contemporary depictions of the Vikings paint them as fierce, seafaring warriors who journeyed far from their Scandinavian homeland, embarking on raids and establishing settlements across distant lands. Yet a crucial aspect often overlooked is their trade expertise. In fact, their trading prowess was so significant that when they weren't engaged in raiding or farming, they were busy trading or preparing goods for trade. To fully grasp this facet of Viking life, we must take a trip back in time to a period before the infamous raids and exploratory voyages became what they were known for. Initially, the Viking economy was predominantly subsistence-based, with the majority of people living on isolated rural homesteads. Each household was largely self-sufficient, producing most of what its members required for daily life. This included cultivating crops, hunting game, and raising livestock. However, as some households began to accumulate surplus goods, they started participating in a form of domestic trade. This trade typically took place at seasonal rural markets and was conducted through a barter system. Surplus goods, such as extra foodstuffs, were exchanged for items that were either absent from their own farms or were specialized goods crafted by others. These could range from different types of food that were not locally available to crafted items like furniture, raw materials, or weapons made by skilled artisans. Around the 8th century, the Viking Age was about to begin. The trade by barter system grew even bigger as the population expanded significantly. At some point, affluent or powerful Vikings, such as kings or local magnates, recognized the need to establish trading towns. Initially, these trading towns were small markets where Vikings could gather to trade among themselves. As they began exploring other regions for raiding, they also started trading with merchants throughout Europe, Asia, and the Far East. Typically, they would plunder a new location if it was poorly defended. However, if a place was too fortified, they chose to trade instead of risking Viking lives unnecessarily. When it came to food-related items, the Vikings exported only a few products. This was primarily because most of the people they traded with had their own food supplies, so there was little demand for Viking food exports. Additionally, it is believed that the Vikings did not export much food because they only had enough for themselves, as the cold climate in their region was not ideal for growing a wide variety of food items. The preferred food exports were honey and wheat, as these items did not spoil quickly before reaching their destinations. More valuable, non-edible goods such as feathers, falcons, whalebone, walrus ivory, reindeer antler, and amber were also traded as exports by the Vikings. These items were sought after for their rarity and utility in various crafts and luxury items. However, despite their value, these goods were not considered the most important exports for the Vikings. This honor was reserved for furs and slaves. Fur came from the Vikings' local mammals, which had developed thick, luxuriant pelts to adapt to the cold climate of Scandinavia. Due to their exquisite quality, these pelts were highly prized abroad, particularly in places like Europe and the Middle East. Meanwhile, the slaves were people whom the Vikings had captured during their raids. They were sold to a variety of people, but primarily to the Arab Caliphate. Transactions largely took place in Eastern Europe and Mediterranean ports such as Venice and Marseille. Interestingly, the Vikings did not hesitate to raid each other's settlements and sell their fellow Scandinavians into slavery. To them, it was all about the market value of a slave at the time when the slave trade business was practiced across the world. Slaves who weren't sold ended up being used by the Vikings themselves, or as part of tribute agreements with other rulers. When it came to imports, the Vikings focused on acquiring goods they couldn't access or produce in Scandinavia. Among the most coveted imports were silk and spices from the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. Glassware, weapons, and wine were also highly sought after, sourced from regions like Francia and the Mediterranean. While these imported items generally improved the lives of many, a significant portion also served as status symbols among the Viking elite. Perhaps the most important aspect of the Viking economy during its peak was the development of a Boolean economy. Unlike a simple barter system where goods were exchanged directly for other goods, the Vikings increasingly used bullion, primarily precious metals like silver and gold, as a medium of exchange. This shift meant that food, goods, and other items were often traded for bullion instead of other goods, creating a more sophisticated and flexible economic system. It is estimated that 8 ounces of silver was equivalent to 1 ounce of gold during the Viking era. This amount of silver could purchase either 4 milk cows, 24 sheep, 144 ells of cloth, or even an adult male slave. For larger transactions, silver ingots weighing over 1 kilogram were commonly used. Conversely, the silver was cut into smaller pieces for smaller transactions to match the exact weight needed for the trade. With transactions occurring daily, fake bullion was bound to appear and be used by dubious traders. Legitimate traders were well aware of these fakes and tested for purity and mass to ensure the authenticity of the traded bullion to avoid being scammed. The mass was determined using weights and scales, often compact and collapsible for easy transportation. Meanwhile, the purity was tested with methods like pricking and pecking, which revealed plating and helped confirm that the hardness of the bullion was equivalent to typical silver or gold. Despite the large collection of bullion that was traded during the Viking Age, most of that wealth was owned by the richest traders or the chieftains, who had accumulated their wealth after extensive raiding. However, simple Viking farmers sometimes had a little silver to purchase items from the outside world that they could not trade for goods from their farms. Initially, this bullion was sourced from the Arabs, who had it in abundance. Eventually, locally struck bullion was created for its use within the Viking economy. Unsurprisingly, the Viking trading activities led to the establishment of significant trading towns, replacing the earlier smaller markets. Some of these towns evolved organically from modest markets that expanded over time. Others are believed to have been meticulously planned and constructed with exact specifications by rich chieftains who wanted to increase their wealth by taxation. Regardless of their origins, these towns were strategically located along Scandinavia's coasts, often near natural harbors or fjords, making it easier for incoming ships from distant lands to dock and conduct trade. These trading towns also connected a number of trading routes that went in the directions of north, east, west, and south to different parts of the world. For instance, a trading town named Hedeby is said to be the biggest of its kind that existed during the Viking Age. It was located along Denmark's southern borders within the sheltered waters of the Schlei Fjord. Strategically positioned, it controlled both the north-south trade routes linking Europe and Scandinavia, as well as the east-west passage between the Baltic and North Seas. At its peak, this trading town had as many as 1,000 people living there. At some point, its pivotal role in Viking commerce led its leaders to fortify the town against raids by European pirates and even rival Vikings. Ribe, another significant trading town, thrived on Denmark's west coast, primarily serving the eastern trade routes. It relied heavily on the Dnieper and Volga rivers as key waterways. Beyond these well-known centers, archaeological discoveries have unveiled a network of additional trading hubs like Kaupang in Norway and Birka in Sweden. Amazingly, many of these places not only facilitated commerce, but also served as manufacturing centers and their clientele. By the end of the Viking Age, the Vikings' trading routes and towns had significantly impacted the world. Surprisingly, only a minority of traders participated in the long-distance trade that extended to distant lands, as they were the only ones who had the means to do so. Most of the trade was local, focusing primarily on food, feed, animals, and locally produced goods. With time, these once thriving trading towns vanished, leaving behind only the faint outlines of their economic influence in the form of trade routes. Several speculations have been made to explain their demise. Some say that it was due to the shift from chieftain-led societies to to centralized kingdoms. As trade enriched certain chieftains, they consolidated power, transforming into kingdoms and establishing new administrative centers that eclipsed the older trading towns. A second possibility is that the continent transitioned to a bulk economy, which reduced the strategic importance of these intermediary trade hubs. One more explanation claims that the trading towns were lost due to natural disasters and destruction from assaults made by pirates and other enemies. For now, the real answers remain lost in time.